Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, it's indeed a pleasure to be allowed the opportunity to provide just a little bit of insight into what has been happening with respect to the Ministry of National Security over the past fiscal, and importantly, to provide also some idea and some indication as to the roadmap ahead of us at national security, as much as I can in any event, over the next fiscal. And I'd like to start, Mr. Vice President, by just indicating that one of the areas that national security contributes, and one of the areas that we should all in this House and the other place be able to contribute to, is that of legislation. Because ultimately, as legislators, that is part and a major part of our role, unless you're in a government position. So just to remind people that it was in November of last year that the government, after many, many decades of listening to people and listening to people complain about the scourge of something as simple as scratch bombs, we passed the Prohibition of Scratch Bombs Order 2018 on the 22nd of November 2018. We have also piloted, and it's really been led by the Minister in the Office of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, working along with national security, the Private Security Industry Bill 2019, which is currently before a Joint Select Committee of Parliament, and making good progress with quite an extensive amount of consultation taking place. Mr. Vice President, three extremely important pieces of legislation that are making an impact immediately upon the area of crime in Trinidad and Tobago that were pushed from the Ministry of National Security. And I thank at this stage my government colleagues for supporting the move of national security are the anti-gang legislation, the Firearms Amendment Bill 2019, and the Bail Amendment Bill. And Mr. Vice President, I'd like to thank the members of this House, of this Senate, who supported the passage of that legislation, because that legislation, despite all of the critics and the naysayers, has been effectively utilized by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and our intelligence services, and they have made significant inroads into the gang activities taking place in Trinidad and Tobago. There have been, and I put it on record here in the Senate, a number of significant charges specifically under the anti-gang legislation. That anti-gang legislation recently has brought to bear on 4 persons who it is alleged and now have been charged under the anti-gang legislation for being significant players in the criminal industry of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is in addition to those who were charged previously. And I'm told, and I'm happy to hear this, that today it was also laid in the Senate a further amendment to the bail bill. That amendment will be dealt with at the appropriate time, but I'd like to put a marker down now. It is a significant and necessary tool, because the types of firearms that we're dealing with on the outside in the hands of the criminal element are very sophisticated firearms. National security has also in the past year, Mr. Vice President, significantly appointed leaders to the positions of the Commissioner of Police. That was done in the House of Representatives without the support of the opposition. The Chief of Defence Staff, who is one of our youngest Chief of Defence Staffs in many, many years, and also recently a permanent director of the Security Services Agency, or Intelligence Services. The benefit that we already have been seeing over the past year of these 3 individuals is they all came from the same batch. Something that may seem as trivial as that, Mr. Vice President, was a strategic decision by the government out of the Ministry of National Security. And again, the country is reaping the benefits of those decisions. Mr. Vice President, I'd also like to put on record that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has received an increased allocation over the next fiscal. So when people bandy about the figure of $6 billion to national security, that includes over $2.5 billion to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And in accordance with Section 123A of the Constitution, the Commissioner of Police is the accounting officer. The Commissioner of Police for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is in charge of administrative and financial areas of the police service. That extra almost $400 million was again a strategic decision by the government of Trinidad and Tobago to ensure that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service are properly asseted and properly given the necessary fiscal support that they require as we tackle this scourge of crime over the next fiscal. Also coming out of national security, we intend to bring regulations to deal with our intelligence services, and also we have finally, I understand it is now out of the LRC and should be laid shortly, amendments to the dangerous drug schedule to deal with this recent phenomenon that we're facing of ecstasy pills and Zessa pills. Again, the government is working to criminalize those areas. What has also significantly happened in the past fiscal is the strengthening of our security relations with the energy sector. What we did, Mr. Vice President, is we signed on the 27th of November 2018, as the Minister of National Security, I signed a memorandum of understanding with major stakeholders in the energy sector of Trinidad and Tobago, both upstream and downstream, to ensure that we have a specific plan to deal with the energy assets in Trinidad and Tobago and to properly secure them and to make sure that we're all working on the same page, government and private sector, as we bring to bear the state security apparatus to better secure the energy sector. The Ministry of National Security also signed an interagency MOU to regulate fishing in August of 2019, and I'll deal with the issue of fishing a little later on in my contribution. This was also signed along with officials from the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, Ministry of Works and Transport, Ministry of Trade and Industry, and the THA. And I'm sure that my colleague, the Honourable Minister for Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, will touch on that in his contribution, what it is we intend to do with the fishing folk in Trinidad and Tobago and the GPS registration of their vessels, etc. We have also worked hard in properly securing and improving the security arrangements at the Piarco International Airport, along with the TSA out of the United States. And I'm happy to tell Trinidad and Tobago, based on the work that was done along with the Ministry of Works and Transport, we staved off any threat of being downgraded by the TSA. And Piarco now is a much safer and more secure institution, and we will continue to work towards improving the security at Piarco. I'm also happy to announce, and I'd like to personally thank Senator Rambarat for his assistance on this. In the past year, and to thank my cabinet colleagues for their support, in the past year, for the first time, a government of Trinidad and Tobago has granted parcels of land and buildings to the Trinidad and Tobago Social Welfare Officers Association, the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Officers Association, the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Officers Association, so they can, for the first time, build their own headquarters and wellness centers. So we've looked after the police officers, our prison officers, and our fire officers in that manner in the last fiscal year. Mr. Vice President, now to deal with some of the specifics with respect to the various divisions that fall under national security. Over the past year, a lot of time, energy, and resources have been placed on working with our prison system. In fact, just this morning, I was speaking with Mr. Seren Richards. We have formed a very good relationship with and working with the Prison Officers Association. As we understand their plight, we understand the dilemma, we understand the circumstances under which they work. In the past year, Cabinet approved and we have been implementing improvements to the remand yard at Golden Grove. Some of these improvements will include better ventilation, the better toilet facilities in each of the cells, making the cells more in line with what you would expect in this type of environment in the 21st century. I've also visited personally and walked the remand at Golden Grove, Port of Spain, as well as what exists in Tobago, and I'll come to Tobago in a short while, and heard the plights of those who are held in remand as well as the prison officers, and I give them the assurance that this government is working feverishly to improve the conditions at the various remand facilities. We are also improving the CCTV camera systems, the alarm systems at Golden Grove, are almost completed. The alarm system at the maximum security prison is being upgraded after it was left unattended for too many years, as well as the CCTV camera system at Golden Grove, as well as the maximum security. We are in the process of upgrading all of these, and we will then feed the monitoring back to the National Operations Fusion Center, where there will be multi-agency task force set up. So it will be all of national security looking on at what is going on there and providing the levels of support. I'm also happy to say that for the first time since the inception of the prison service in Trinidad and Tobago, they finally, in this last year, have their own colors, and that means their own prison flag, which is a very big step for the prison service. There have also been a number of rehabilitative programs in the prisons, in the areas of debate, art, pushing the library, pushing for better library facilities, other programs working along with, for example, Mr. Wayne Chance, and working towards providing those inmates in our prison service with hope that when they come back out, they will be better reintegrated into society. And I use this opportunity, Mr. Vice President, to make a plea to the population to understand that when dealing with our prisoners and many of our inmates who are remorseful and would like a second chance, that we find a way as private sector and as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to allow them to reintegrate into society. I've also requested of the Office of the Attorney General, and the Attorney General has assured me he's working on it and is close to completion. For the first time, a probation service that will deal with persons in our prison system who qualify that they can be let out on probation and monitored. The electronic monitoring system, I'm happy to say we finally have all of the equipment in hand. We've set up the monitoring system. Right now, the only thing we're waiting on is for the judiciary to amend what needs to be amended on their side. Because at the end of the day, the judiciary are the ones who would be ordering or sentencing who can use these electronic monitoring bracelets. We are ready to go. We are also in the process of upgrading all of the fence at the various prison facilities, meaning at Golden Grove, at the YETC. Also, I've asked for it to be done at the IDC for immigration. Unfortunately, these things have been left alone for too long. And I wonder that when we spent $80 million as the people of Trinidad and Tobago on a fence, and a very sophisticated fence outside of the maximum security between 2010 and 2015, what really was the intent of it? I remember going there, seeing that all that is contained within this fenced area that cost the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago $80 million is grass. There's nothing else on the inside. Whereas we're trying to fix our remand facilities, we've brought that cost down to within the $60 million range. So if that money had been spent then when we had money on improving the remand, we would be in a much further advanced place for prison services in Trinidad and Tobago. The Eastern Correctional Facility. Mr. Vice President, this is a facility that irks me very much in particular. I believe it was sometime in 2011, this massive acreage of warehousing facility was bought for over $230 million, $230 million in cash paid for this Eastern Correctional Facility, and then it was not utilized properly. In fact, the area being utilized there is less than, I would say, 10% of the whole square footage and acreage size of the facility. What we did is we looked at it. We have now implemented a second IDC facility there, but it is still massively underutilized. So one questions, and I ask the question as a taxpayer here and as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, what really was the payment of $230 million for warehousing facility done in the Ministry of National Security in or around the years 2011 to 2013? Why was that done? Why was it underutilized? Why was that transaction completed? We've also provided the prisons with 250 new firearms, and we've started the procurement process for the second set of handguns. I'd like to put on record, because I heard the most ridiculous propositions in another place in response to some of these initiatives. Yes, there are about 3,000 prison officers, but they already had a number of firearms, and it is not every prison officer will be provided. There's a policy in place with a proper threat assessment. The prison officers already had firearms. And what we have done is we have now provided an extra 250, and we've started the procurement for another 250, which is about to be completed. We provided 178 stab vests. The second procurement process was begun and is completed now for the provision of another 202 stab vests, with the last set being received in October 2014. Cabinet is currently taking a decision or contemplating the building of a special court right outside the maximum security prison facilities. The idea of this special court is that high-risk prisoners will be easily walked across from the prison facilities to these special courts. So the shutting down of Port of Spain, as we see happening too frequently on a weekly basis, when a certain high-risk, someone determined to be a high-risk prisoner is being brought to Port of Spain, will be a thing of the past. Tobago. The correctional facility at Tobago is archaic. I've spoken about it before on my tour of Tobago and the prison facilities at Tobago. It is highly, highly unsatisfactory. The Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago is taking a decision for the construction of a new correctional facility in Tobago. That would have been done already, the decision taken. However, when the note was first brought to me, it was for over $250 million. I immediately rejected that as the Minister of National Security, because on this side, we are very, very concerned about protecting taxpayers and their money and how money is spent. So you heard a short while ago a former administration paying $230 million in cash for warehouses. This administration, for the construction of a state-of-the-art new correctional facility in Tobago, rejected the first price of $250. It came a second time for about $150 million. Again, I rejected that, and I've sent them back, saying that we will not unnecessarily burden the taxpayers. We have also taken a decision to complete an unfinished building that was being constructed in the previous time and was just left as a shell, as a rehabilitation center for girls, to have a female YTC facility. I'm happy to tell the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago the cost of completing this building will be less than $4 million, as opposed to going out and trying to construct and waste money on a completely new facility. Our female and juvenile offenders, unfortunately, is becoming more prevalent. They are proving to be very demanding and very difficult at times. So a specific facility that will conform with the legislation is going to be constructed for girls, a female equivalent of YTC, utilizing the shell of a building that was left abandoned. We have heard, and I personally went and toured and saw the vehicles being used by the prison officers. They are not in a satisfactory condition. This is something that I went to my cabinet colleagues about before we settled the budget. Extra money was provided for the provision of vehicles for prison officers. I have asked our permanent secretaries to commence the procurement of these vehicles, and I intend over the next fiscal year for us to do the procurement of vehicles for the prison officers. That is long overdue. With respect to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Mr. Vice President, Cabinet recently approved a new structure for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that moves more with the times. We're focusing more on intelligence-driven operations. There are now a number of specialized units in the police service that we've put under one umbrella and head. For example, the SORT. We also now have SIU, and there are a number of other specialized units that we are utilizing in the police service whilst providing support across the various divisions. You have heard, the population would have heard in the last year the announcement of the re-establishment of the Marine branch. Just in conversation with the Commissioner of Police this morning, he assures me that within the next 2 months, we will be able to see the physical launch of a new re-established Marine branch that will assist in the coastal patrolling and as well as inland with some flat-bottom boats that can go up the tributaries. Work has been started on the Carenage Police Station. We opened the Shervan Police Station, a state-of-the-art, and I dare say probably one of the best, if not the best, police station in the whole Caribbean region. We have almost finished the next state-of-the-art police station in Roxborough, in Tobago East, and I look forward to the opening of that, I'm told, before the end of this year. We are currently constructing a new fire station. Again, in Roxborough. I'm happy to report that while sod was turned a few months ago, work has proceeded apace, and I expect that Roxborough police station to be opened and utilized in the next fiscal year. Mr. Vice President, another significant achievement for the people of Trinidad and Tobago was the refurbishment of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Patrol Bike Unit. You'd have seen we recently took possession of over 200 patrol bikes that I'm happy to tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago we got free and gratis from the government of Trinidad and Tobago. So that is a great example of how this government operates in terms of seeking to get best value for money, and on this occasion, paying no money for 200 patrol bikes. And this government is not about the granting of contracts, which I'll come to in a short while, and who is given what contract, who buys a property for $230 million and then doesn't worry to use the property, and these types of things. We seek where we can to get best value for money. I take the opportunity as well to thank the United States government at this stage for donating a significant amount of canine assets to our Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and our prison services. You saw some of them on display at the recent Independence Day parade. We thank the United States government for that. This government has rebuilt the bridges and the relationships with many of the foreign governments, and we've been working hard to establish and get as much as we can for Trinidad and Tobago. The ERP vehicle system is working. It is being utilized. We are trying to further upgrade it and further provide resources to have more lines available and a better connection between the civilian persons who answer the telephones and our police service, so you can have a quicker response. If you look at this budget, you would see that the government has taken a decision to provide the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service with $70 million for vehicles. Now, these vehicles will include some of the marine vessels, but $70 million as well for them to upgrade their fleet of vehicles. We've also provided $25 million for the purchase of specialized equipment for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. That this equipment, once procured and implemented, is going to assist the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service in their fight against crime. Minor equipment purchases, we've provided $40 million, and other minor equipment, $19 million. And I take the opportunity now to put to rest, Mr. Vice President, a false narrative that is being pushed out there and being pumped out there about the Commissioner of Police saying that he did not have sufficient financial resources. The record reflects that at the end of fiscal 2019, when the books were closed, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service got over $330 million for goods and services that was way above their allocation, and that was topped up and further pushed upward in the mid-year review, and all of the funds that were allocated were provided to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. The anti-gang work. Anti-gang work is proceeding apace in a multi-agency task force operation. That multi-agency task force is working well. It includes our intelligence services, our prison services, our defense force, all supporting the Trinidad and Tobago Police Services. You would have seen recently us inspecting, not launching, the Strike Back Operation 2. Again, it was buried, unfortunately, the statistics coming out of that. To date, that Strike Back 2 operation has led to the arrest of well over 170 criminals and the prosecution of many of them. And we're marrying that with the firearm amendments that were passed here in the Senate and in the House, and as well the bail amendment. And at this stage, Mr. Vice President, through you, I'd like to tell all members of the Senate, those two simple, what may have seemed to be simple amendments, are making a critically important advantage, or providing an important advantage to our Trinidad and Tobago law enforcement. We utilized it recently, the anti-gang legislation, with some well-known gang leaders. We went for detention orders under the anti-gang legislation. The courts granted the detention orders. That allowed us to put all of the evidence to the criminals whilst they were still under a period of arrest. Subsequently, on the advice of the Director of Public Prosecutions, they were charged, and now they are not out on bail. We had the most, in my view, Mr. Vice President, the most ridiculous, one of the most ridiculous scenarios took place recently, where we held someone with 9 AR-15s. An AR-15 is a machine for war. It is a tool designed for warfare. It is a machine gun. We held someone in my constituency of Belmont with 9 of them, and on his first occasion in court, a magistrate granted bail. What we're coming with the bail amendment that's been laid here today as another provision is to prevent those types of occasions, because we cannot be carrying out these types of exercises, tackling crime, and then have them spilling back out onto the streets straight away. We need a fighting chance, and that is what we would be asking for. The strike back operations are working well. What we've also seen in the past year is a resurgence and an increase in the multi-agency operations between our defense force, the prisons, the police service, and our intelligence services, and our operations being driven by intelligence, and they're meeting with a lot more success now. The Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, I'm happy to report that the CCC and MILAT programs, Cabinet took decisions to extend these programs and in fact extend the intake of these programs. They are working very, very successfully. We did a tracer study. We did a tracer study to see that those who are in the programs, how they're going on after they've left the programs. The programs are providing our defense force with some intake to the normal defense force, but also all of those, the vast majority of those interviewed, said that that made a huge and a world of difference to their lives. So these programs are, I thank my cabinet colleagues for assisting and supporting the decision to continue and increase these programs. Also, within the last couple of months, we opened the Army Learning Center Training Building. This is a one-of-the-kind in the CARICOM region, and what it is really a learning facility for Trinidad and Tobago Army, for the regiment side of life, where now, instead of having to send our officers and those who want to progress their careers throughout the defense force away on training, we're now able to offer it in our own state-of-the-art facilities, which are housed at Tetron, and they're to be congratulated for that. Camp La Romaine. We are going to be spending a lot more time, emphasis, and focus, $10 million on Camp La Romaine during this fiscal, to better the facilities there so we can launch specific operations from the southern part of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Vice President, our coastal radar system, despite all of the suggestions out there that the coastal radar system is not working, that is completely false. The coastal radar system is working, and I'd like to take this opportunity because I feel very proud as a Trinidadian. Recently, I had a meeting with the Israeli providers of this coastal radar system. And the gentleman who has actually been there from inception when this system was put in place in about 2005 said that the officers, the men and women who maintain our coastal radar system, not only in Trinidad, but also up at some of the OECS islands where we also have a couple of radar systems, they said they are the best in the world that utilize this system. And to hear that our Trinidadian men and women in the Coast Guard who have been trained and who are maintaining this system to be declared to be amongst the best in the world, that was something that I felt very proud about as a Trinidadian. We have taken the decision to upgrade the system, and you know it's an unfortunate attribute, but a necessary one of national security, that unfortunately you can't get into the particulars, and you can't speak about exactly what the upgrades are, how they would affect things, but I can guarantee to the people of Trinidad and Tobago that these upgrades are going to make another world of difference as they take us much further into the type of technology that is available. And I'm happy to say, Mr. Vice President, once again in this instance, we saved tens of millions of US dollars in how we went about procuring the upgrades. Because you see, we didn't just let any and everybody come in and push a system down our throat, as may have happened before. Also, what I'm happy to update on is, again, another area of savings. A proposal had been brought and had been approved for new interceptors. 3 new interceptors for Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard at about approximate cost of $60 million. So that was to be approximately 60 million TT dollars, approximately $20 million for an interceptor. When that was brought to me as Minister of National Security, I refused it. I asked for a report on the existing interceptors. It came back to me that there were 14 that with some work and some new engines could be brought back into use. That is going to cost the taxpayers $7 million as opposed to $60 million for 3 interceptors. Another massive area of savings coming out of the Ministry of National Security. I'm assured that the engines for those interceptors, which we ran into some difficulty in being able to procure, will arrive during the course of this week or early next week, and then we will be able to add 10 more of those interceptors in a phased rollout basis over the next month and a half. The Air Guard. The Air Guard has been utilizing the 2 fixed-wing aircraft, 2 C-26 aircraft over the past year. We are in the process of getting drones. I'm looking forward to being able to make that announcement in a not-too-distant future, and the savings, once again, to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Over the next fiscal, I hope to be able to introduce, once my cabinet colleagues support it, an air unit that will be run by the Air Guard. Because before, what you had was the NOC, which at the time fell under the Office of the Prime Minister, purchasing helicopters, one of which never made it to Trinidad and Tobago, even though we were paying over $200,000 a month. It was always in a hangar in Delaware. The next one that made it to Trinidad and Tobago, within a few months of landing here, was unable to be utilized. So you had the NOC having those and some other small rotary wing assets. You then had the Air Guard having 4 AW aircraft, Augusta Westland 139 aircraft that were originally for the OPVs and much too big, much too expensive. Those were grounded. I'm hoping to go to my colleagues very shortly with a new proposal for the utilization of those aircraft on commercial terms with National Helicopter Services, and us to get some specific helicopters that will be put under the Air Guard but used in an air unit for both the TTDF, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, as well as our intelligence services. So again, ensuring best value for money for Trinidad and Tobago. I'd like to also thank the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force, and in particular some of our specialized units, for assisting the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service in some of the border protection that has been going on land within the past year. The Forensic Center. Mr. Vice President, I have great pleasure to say that for the first time in decades, we have filled all 4 permanent posts of forensic pathologists at the Forensic Science Center. Of course, the forensic pathologists are the individuals who deal with autopsies, and we're not stopping there. We continue to work with the UNDP, and we expect to get 2 volunteer forensic pathologists within this fiscal, which will take the full complement beyond the 4 in the establishment to 6, and hopefully ensure that any difficulties with the performance of autopsies are a thing of the past. And that has finally happened after decades. What we've also done at the Forensic Science Center is we are in the process of hiring 10 specific specialized professionals to bolster the work being done there, including in the ballistics area. I want to put on record that we have been receiving the support of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service armorers, as well as the CIRU unit, in performing the necessary ballistic tests, but we are looking to supplement and increase our capabilities in that area. Immigration. Mr. Vice President, over the past year, our immigration officers have performed admirably. I would like to thank them for their service, and in particular, they took on the task of the Venezuelan registration system. It was driven specifically by immigration. We registered 16,523 persons claiming to be Venezuelans during that period of time. We always said that after that registration process, there would
Minister, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you very much. There would have to be a verification and a due diligence exercise that has taken place. 10,000 is in the process of taking place, but 10,000 people have passed. We have issued 8,000 cards, and I'm happy to say that whilst Cabinet had approved a cost of $5 million, our expenditure by the 30th of September 2019 was only $4.3 million for that whole process. Over the next year, we'll be getting rid of immigration forms, and we'll also be moving to a biometric system. Allow me now at this stage, as I have my last 5 minutes, to address the spurious allegations and falsehoods that continue to be proffered by Senator Wade Mark with respect to the hostile Cape-class vessels. The first thing is, these hostile Cape-class vessels were procured directly from the Australian government. You would recall that when we announced we were procuring these vessels, those on the other side, the opposition, wrote to the Australian Attorney General to try and topple the whole deal. Of course, that was rejected. The vessels are being financed by the Australian EFIC. They are the ones who are doing the financing. This claim that there were vessels purchased in 2015 for the Australian government at a much cheaper cost, it depends on what you put into the vessels. The cost of the vessels have, of course, increased as steel and aluminum and all other methods of technology have since moved away. And I'd like to read very briefly. First of all, each vessel is costing $41 million. That $41 million is specific for the type of equipment and technology that we want to put on board. This is what Hostal has had to say specifically about the continued allegations by those on the other side, directly from Hostal, Australia. The report is not accurate, as the comparison is not apples for apples. There are substantial differences which have been factored. Here are the detailed factors as per your request. CCBP 9 and 10, the contract was in 2017. Those are the Australian vessels. Therefore, changes in material cost and labor escalation, followed on an 8-boat order on an existing production line. So, of course, it depends on the already boats in stream and being built. That would reduce the cost. Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard's new contract with associated startup costs. There have been changes to specifications. For example, our radio system, they use Motorola. We use the Harris system in Trinidad and Tobago. Those are some of the changes that push the cost up. General arrangement unique to the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard drive considerable redesign costs, changes to equipment list, revised gen sets, changes to equipment list on the tactical communications, changes to make the model and numbers of the ship's boats, now 6 boats, and we've also entered into a maintenance and a spares program that is part of that whole cost. The compressed time frame, because we've asked for these vessels to be built and delivered by next year, 2020. All of these things have a cost item. So therefore, I reject completely and out of hand what has been suggested repeatedly by Senator Mark. I'd just like to end by this. There's been a lot of crying out in the population about fishermen. I have been very careful as the Minister of National Security when I call people fishermen. There have been a certain amount of kidnappings that have taken place, and I'll end by saying this. I am fairly certain that certainly on this side and the independent side, there's no one that would be able to raise even $5,000 in cash from a bank if they walked into a bank now. I believe this question for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. How could a fisherman raise $20,000 in cash overnight to pay a ransom? Furthermore, when these vessels were intercepted going out to fish, there was not a single hook, line, sinker in any of the vessels, nor any fish. I am very cautious about what I say, and I guarantee those in the Senate, as well as outside, with a lot of my recent utterances, including on a political platform last week, Friday, I have the evidence to substantiate everything I've said. We will continue to do the work that we're doing at national security. We will continue to go after the criminals in national security without fear or favor, and we will do so to the best of our ability. I give the assurance, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Sipasa.